So, a few weeks ago, I got this comment asking me what I thought would happen if the Octarians won the Great Turf War, and my mind went crazy when I heard this. There are so many possibilities as to how this could go. So, today I'm going to give my opinion on what I think would have happened if the Octarians won the Great Turf War. So, to first understand what would happen if they had won, we need to understand what happened, what the Great Turf War was, why it was important, and why and how the Inklings won. So, the Great Turf War was a short war between the Inklings and their allies and the Octarians. It wasn't exactly what you think of when you hear turf war, though fighting for territory with ink-based weapons was definitely happening, but it probably wasn't the biggest contributor to the mass destruction in the Great Turf War. Both sides made huge weapons of mass destructions like these giant squids and octopi. Some were even inspired based off of tripods from War of the Worlds, and some were the bosses we eventually fought in Hero Modes 1 and 2. This conflict is important because it sets up literally everything we play through in the Splatoon games. It's pretty easy to explain why it was important, but what's hard to explain is how the Inklings won. Officially, we heard the Inklings won because they had more tentacles, but like, come on. But just to entertain the stupid idea for a sec, wouldn't that make the Octolings less powerful in-game since they have less tentacles? Okay, I think we all really knew that that reasoning was kinda BS, so we're gonna have to get into some theory territory here. The theory that I'm gonna go with today is that Inkling weapons of mass destruction and the Squidbeak Splatoon were just so advanced and powerful that they brought down everything the Octarians had to throw at them, which led to their defeat and made them go crazy with developing advanced technologies, which we see in Hero Mode 1 and 2. So now that we've got our background info established, let's figure out what would have happened if the Octarians won. So the biggest thing that would be different is the location of the Inklings. Since the Turf War was over who had control of the surface, the Inklings would be the ones forced into the underground. This would be devastating to the Inklings because their society is much more laid back than the Octarians, and it's not like their carefree nature originated from the peace they got after the Great Turf War. For most of the war, Inklings were falling behind from the Octarians, and the reason we heard from this was couldn't wake up in time, and although this is definitely another load of BS, it doesn't take away from the fact that Inklings are probably falling behind due to laziness. So the Inklings are forced underground into what can now be called Inkling Canyon, and that's where things get much darker for the Inklings. Octo Canyon wasn't in great shape when we played through it in Hero Mode, and that's after all the renovations the Octarians did. The Inklings would try their hardest to hold their territory together, but it wouldn't be able to hold together as well as the Octarians held it. And one of the biggest reasons why is because they wouldn't resort to the measures the Octarians went to. As of now, in the canon, there's no such thing as an Inkling equivalent to an Octo Trooper. The developers haven't confirmed or denied it, but they said they haven't seen one before. So for the sake of this video, I'm going to say there's no such thing as an Inkto Trooper, as they would be called, to hold up the back end of their newfound Inkling Valley. So the condition of this place would probably fall apart much quicker. Inklings probably wouldn't develop technology as fast, and in turn, it would have a much larger power crisis than the Octarians even had in Hero Mode. In this timeline, I don't think either species would set up trade agreements with the Salmonids. Octarians probably wouldn't have gone as crazy developing military technology after the victory, and the Inklings, though having some new things to bring to the table, probably wouldn't have developed nearly as much as the Octarians had. In the end though, I think we'd see the Inklings rise up to fight the Octarians again in a more head-on approach than what we see the Octarians do in Splatoon with their little covert operations of stealing the Great Zapfish. I think the Inklings would end up trying to start a second Great Turf War, but this one would not last nearly as long because they're already worn out from what they have to deal with in Inkto Valley, and the well-rested Octarian force could very well be the final blow to the Inklings and force the few survivors into a nomadic lifestyle in Inkling Valley, while some of the Inklings would just give up on Japan / whatever Inkopolis is called now and end up finding or starting new places like Splatsville. So that just about covers what happens to the Inklings, but what about the Octarians? Well, I think it would be kind of like Inkling Society for the Octarians, but more strict. I doubt the hypnoshades and all the mind control things would ever be developed, but a lot of society would be based around how their history is and how they defeated the Inklings. I doubt this would turn into some fascist military war machine, because we've heard that the Octarians never wanted to fight the Inklings until they had to over territory. Octavia would let the reins go a little looser than we see in Octo Valley. There would be individual freedoms, but no criticism of the government would be allowed whatsoever. Society would be based around Octarian pride, and Octavia would be basically looked at as the greatest person to ever prefer to live. If I had to compare it to anywhere in the world, I think it would be pretty similar to India. Personal freedoms are allowed, but don't you dare go criticizing the government or they will start knocking heads. I think that the allies that the Inklings had during the Great Turf War would probably make peace agreements with the Octarians, but tensions between the Octarians and the species that sided with the Inklings would be pretty high. There'd definitely be some racism from the Octarians over having to live among the people they viewed as lower due to the Octarians winning against them, and I don't think that even with the peace agreements that the other species would have equal rights to the Octarians. Basically, Octarian society would be a mix of India and 50s to 60s America, so not exactly the best place to live. In the end, these are just my thoughts and theories as to what would happen if the Octarians won the Great Turf War. There's no way to know for sure what would happen if they did, because this isn't the ending we got, and this is not what happens at all. If you disagree with me, then that is totally fine. We are all entitled to our own opinions, and this video was just my opinion, and I would love to hear your opinions as long as they're presented in a peaceful way. But wait, before this video is over, did you know that only 16.6% of viewers who actually watch my videos are subscribed? Well, my dear unsubscribed viewer, I have an offer to you. Today, and today only, if you subscribe, there is a slight chance that you will receive your very own skyscraper. Yep, it's your own. You can keep it. It'll show up right outside your front door. Basically acts the same way as a dog does, except this thing is like hundreds of thousands of feet tall. Hundreds of thousands? No, probably like 1,000 feet tall. Something around there. Yeah, it walks around. This is basically like Siren Head, but basically its own building. But yeah, the only way you'll get this is if you subscribe right now. The odds are low, but never impossible. But that's it from me, gamers. I will see you later.